Well, welcome everyone. Josh's Severe Weather. Hope you all are having a great Wednesday and a great week so far. Hard to believe that January is almost over and we're getting closer and closer to spring, but not so fast. We still have winter to talk about. And this video is going to talk about, well, let's see, Groundhog Days coming up this weekend. Are we going to have an early spring or are we in for 6 more weeks of winter? Or are we going to go back and forth? And as always, long range forecasting is what we're going to try to do our very best at. But nobody can honestly control the weather at this point. All we can really do is make an educated guess. So I'm going to talk about the short term weather, what's going on here. A big battle going on right now with very cold weather in New England and extremely mild temperatures compared to how cold it's been all month down south and even in the plains. Is that going to last? Or are we going to be seeing a return to winter coming up in February? So, this video is going to break all that down and more. So, I appreciate you joining me here today. I'm going to share my screen with you and we'll show you what's going on right now first. And then we're going to walk through the forecast and then we're going to take a look at that longer range forecast. So, you can see right now where the dividing line is right here 60 degrees in Virginia, 8 degrees in Maine. Nice boundary right here. If you want to call it nice, I don't know if I call anything nice when it's 8 degrees in Maine, but there's still winter going on, even though we're getting a nice little break here as it's in the 70s in the Carolinas today. The first time we've gone past 60 at my house in Raleigh since December, 70s on the Gulf Coast, but there is cooler weather returning to parts of the Intermountain West here, and that is going to eventually advance eastward here. So here's a look at how much snow we've had, and you can see a lot of the country's seen snow. In fact, every state in the country has seen snow, but some are haves and some are have-nots. In fact, if I take you to the plains first, check this out here. Let me get the north central states open. You can see it really hasn't been all that snowy this winter, especially in Omaha. There's some places that have had less than an inch of snow. Then you go up to Des Moines, we've had about 8 inches. Then you see another hole here over parts of South Dakota. Even the Twin Cities have not had a ton of snow. In the eastern part of the country, quite a bit of snow around the Great Lakes, but when you get into northwest Ohio, less than a foot in many locations. If you get over into the Philadelphia area and the south coast of New England and New Jersey, most of you still have not seen a major snowfall in several winters here. And then, of course, we got to go down to the south and Charlotte, North Carolina, very little. Upstate South Carolina, very little. Eastern Carolinas have actually seen quite a bit more and more than average. Even parts of northern Florida have seen snow. And then the big winner is the Gulf states here, where we've seen some places picking up a foot or so of snow last week. But when you get north of the Gulf region into parts of Dixie here, we are again snowless. So a very odd winter going on here. And as odd as it is now, I think we're still in for several more surprises and several more oddball months coming up here in the next couple of weeks here. Looking at the West, I don't want to forget those of you in the West. We've talked about how dry it's been in the Southwest, California, obviously the wildfires we've had. Arizona picking up a little bit of rain today, but the mountains have actually done pretty well in the Pacific Northwest, not so well, though, in the Southwest. And then taking you into Colorado, we have seen quite a bit in the ski areas, but not quite so much in Denver. We had a little bit to talk about back in November and December. Things are quieter now, should pick up again here later on, as per usual here this winter. So, right now, a lot of the country is above average, with the exception of the upper Midwest and the Intermountain Southwest, and now the Southern Plains. So, enjoy it while you can, because it has not been this warm in quite some time. But with the change in the weather comes some extreme. We're talking about high winds and some fire danger here. We do have a fire burning, unfortunately, near Old Fort, North Carolina. That area that was hit really hard by Hurricane Helene, especially west of there, now has fire danger. And we see the high winds all the way up into New England, winter weather advisories and winter storm warnings across upstate New York and western New England. We do have a winter weather advisory in upper Michigan. We do have winter storm watches, warnings, and advisories, depending on your elevation, as well across the Intermountain West here, in particular in northern New Mexico. So it is definitely changing quite a bit here. As last week we were talking about winter storm warnings down in here, the high winds out in here, it is completely switched. In between, we do have a threat for some flooding from northeast Texas into the lower Ohio Valley and the mid-Mississippi Valley, as well as into the mountains of West Virginia and southwestern PA, where we're going to deal with snow melting quickly and then rain falling on top of that as well. Here's a look at the upper level picture here with the water vapor image showing you the moisture in the mid and upper levels. Pretty well defined upper level low here. This is spinning over Arizona today. It is bringing moisture up from the Gulf and the Pacific. It is going to move east and begin to pick up over the next couple of days. It hasn't moved a whole lot over the last 2 days, but later this week, we are going to see it move along a lot more quickly. And in fact, that faster speed right now is going to lead to what could be a little bit less severe weather than maybe initially feared a few days ago. Doesn't mean we're not going to have any severe weather or any heavy rain. It just means things are expected to move along a lot faster than maybe originally thought. And you can see here, high pressure is going to build right back in over the top of this. So we will warm back up, but more moisture will head into the Pacific in the form of an atmospheric river. That's going to bring snow impacts to the mountains here of the Intermountain West here, the Cascades into the Sierra Nevada. The Rockies are going to see significant amounts of snow. And in the Northeast, we are going to have some storm impacts as well, with squalls continuing into tonight over parts of Maine and New York as that next shot of cold comes down from Canada. And that's going to lead to some pretty nasty biting wind chills as well. This is the European model from Pivotal Weather. It shows you the mid and upper level of the atmosphere. These are winds. So you kind of see the northern jet stream here that is quickly moving from Western Canada down into New England. We also see the upper level low beginning to eject from the southwest into the plains. And as it does so, the wind field does pick up tomorrow into tomorrow night, meaning we do stand the risk at some damaging winds and maybe a few tornadoes in the warm sector here. But unlike a few days ago, it actually looks like things are going to move along a little bit more quickly here. And by the time we get to the end of this week, this system is going to be kicking offshore pretty quickly, limiting the threat for flooding across a large part of this area. And those of us here in parts of the Southeast, after the snow we got last week, really haven't seen much rain over the last 4 weeks. And with this system moving along pretty quickly, unfortunately, the prospects for bigger amounts of rain are not looking great in the Carolinas down into northern portions of Florida. Next week, we begin another active stretch of weather. You can see the jet stream picks right back up early next week. We are going to see storm after storm starting in the West Coast region. The Pac Northwest will get a lot of moisture moving in by the end of this weekend, and then that'll eventually move inland and cross the country next week. And you can see the cold comes down again and then gets deflected back to the Northeast. So a lot of back and forth across the northern states. But down south, we avoid any shots of winter weather, which begs the question, are we really going to have an early spring? Are we going to see more pollen? Are we going to see severe weather? Or are we going to be deceived into yet another winter? And I love this graphic here because I know it doesn't just pertain to New England, but we definitely had winter. Now we're getting full spring everywhere except northern New England, of course. And then maybe a second winter, a spring of deception, third winter, and then the pollinating. And that pollinating starts next month on the Gulf and moves northward here into the mid-Atlantic, March into April, and eventually into the Northeast by May. So I don't measure things in temperature anomalies anymore. We talk about how much pollen there is, and if we're at the front porch of hell, and if it's fall and second summer. And anyway, you all get the picture here. We like to have a little bit of fun in the weather business. So here's a look at the European model that just came in here this afternoon. You can see the cold moving through eastern Canada. You see the moisture coming up here with our next storm system. It will certainly be a major storm compared to where we've been, but it is a warm storm. Really not much snow to talk about as this system continues to move along to the east. We will see some cold meeting up with that moisture. Some parts of the Northeast here on the way out Friday and Friday night, we'll see some more snow as it gets colder for the weekend, but then we quiet down and see ridging taking place here. And what this allows is that temperatures to warm right back up and bounce back in the plains and the Southeast as we head to the end of this weekend and again into next week. So the cold comes up and over this ridge. You see it drops into New England. So we're definitely going to see more winter in New England. This is Groundhog Day here, and you can see where the clippers are tracking. You can see where the moisture is going to hit the west. You can see where it'll be raining hard here on Sunday, where it'll be snowing hard inland. But much of the rest of the country is enjoying this thaw, and we're enjoying pretty mild temperatures and pretty decent weather here for the next several days. Until that happens, though, we have to talk about snow squalls here in New England first. You can see the lines coming down here through Boston. Not going to be very heavy snow overall, but there will be low visibility and higher winds here as this wave of cold comes down. So travel could get really dicey for some of you here tonight into early tomorrow as these squalls continue to move through. This is kind of wave number 3 of what's been kind of a 3-part system here since the end of this weekend. The good news is that tomorrow things are looking a little bit better across this area. It's still chilly, it's still cloudy, but we do see an end to the squalls. And then our moisture moves in from the west tomorrow night. And as it spreads up and over this colder air mass, we could see a little bit of light freezing rain in the Mohawk Valley into the interior parts of the Northeast here. A little bit of snow breaking out across Maine and New Brunswick as well. And then this changes over primarily to rain for the higher populated areas Friday afternoon and Friday night. But again, this is really not going to be that big a deal for us here in the Northeast. And if you're on the I-95 corridor, the snow drought kind of continues here as we just aren't going to see a whole lot more snow falling across this area. Here's a look at the temperature pattern over the next couple of days, and you can see it's where it's cold and where it's warm. And here's the dam that's holding the cold air in, and it just doesn't get a chance to move much farther south. In fact, it gets pushed back to the north here a little bit tomorrow, and especially on Friday. And next week, look at how mild it is again across much of the country. However, we're not necessarily going to avoid that mild or avoid the cold here in the northern tier. Another shot of cold is expected to drop down next week. And you can see we're going to be at and below zero again in Montana and the northern Dakotas. So right now we are in the 30s and 40s in North Dakota, and we're dropping 50 more degrees between now and Monday morning. So definitely going to get colder there, but down south, really not going to look too bad here into next week as temperatures are in the 60s, 70s, maybe even some 80s for those of you that might be traveling down into Florida. Here's a look at the snow potential here in the Northeast first. And outside of the mountains, not a whole lot, but we could see a few inches even across the I-90 corridor here from Buffalo to Boston, more to your north. And then we got another shot of cold coming in here by Monday and Tuesday, and that primarily brings heavier snow up into Canada and northern parts of New Hampshire, Maine, and Vermont. When you get south of the Poconos, there really isn't much to talk about here as the mild pattern continues. And really, the European doesn't show much happening up until next weekend. Then we might be in for things starting to push back down to the south by about the 9th or 10th of February. Looking across the central part of the country here and the Great Lakes, of course, that's where our snow is going to fall. Again, nothing in Omaha, nothing in Iowa here, at least over the next 5 or 6 days. We just keep missing our storms. Southern Michigan, Chicago, southern Wisconsin, little to nothing to talk about here in the next 10 days. We could see that changing, though, when we get past the 10th or so of February. But in the shorter term, there just isn't anything to talk about here, just a very mild pattern. Now, I know the European tries to bring something up here around the 11th or 12th, but we just can't put a lot of faith in what one model shows 10 days away. That's just not going to necessarily work out in that direction here. Here's a look at the south central states. Heavy rain spreads north and east from Texas into Missouri, Arkansas, and Tennessee. There'll be some severe weather here, some waves of stronger storms, especially overnight into tomorrow morning in northern and eastern Texas, and then later tomorrow in southeast Texas and moving into western Louisiana. That's the area I think has our best chance of seeing some severe weather at this point. You can see it is a marginal risk through tonight, Dallas on west, and then a slight risk tomorrow from Houston on up into Louisiana and maybe far western parts of Mississippi. Zooming in, you can see we do have a 5% and higher risk for a few tornadoes tomorrow afternoon and early in the evening around the Sabine River area, Houston included, and then over to Ruston, Monroe, Natchez, maybe even towards Point Capay Parish and over to New Iberia and Broussard here in Louisiana, and even a chance farther east as we get late into the day, into the evening towards Jackson and the I-55 corridor. So remember last week we were talking about a snowstorm. Now we're back to tornadoes here, just some crazy weather. As we head into Friday, the chance does come down for severe weather. It's not zero, but we may see a little bit of severe weather closer to Mobile and Pensacola. And again, areas that got snow last week could see a little bit of severe weather to round out the month of January. So rainfall totals, they are going to be pretty high in some areas here. A few inches around Dallas, Fort Worth, 3 to 4, maybe 5 inches in parts of north central Arkansas, and a few inches as well across western portions of Kentucky. As I take you east here, though, you are going to see that the rain totals, while not super high, are going to be higher than what we've seen in a while. In Kentucky, in West Virginia, in southern Ohio, and Indiana, even western PA, we do have some potential for some rain. It's not going to be super heavy, but because we have a lot of snow on the ground from how cold it's been, that's going to cause that snow to melt pretty quickly, and we could have some local flooding problems, especially in West Virginia. So keep that in mind. But farther south and east, you can see our totals coming down quite a bit as we get to coastal Georgia, South Carolina, and farther south into Florida. Lightning potential is coming up here tonight and into the day tomorrow across Louisiana, and then it starts to come down some as we get into Friday. I will take you into into Florida here. Not Louisiana. Long week. Florida. And you can see here by the time this thing comes through the panhandle on Friday afternoon and evening, it loses a lot of its punch. And by the time we get to the weekend, the lightning threat is gone across the Sunshine State, which it wasn't last week when I was down there. So far this month, take a look at this from Weather Bell. You can see it's been a cold, cold January. I promised that to you about a month ago, and I try to stick to my promises here, but we have not had a January this cold in several years. Hard to see unless you zoom in, but if you look here on the left, we have a year by year. And really, the last time it was this cold was 2011, and we were colder than that in many places. You really have to go all the way back to 1994 across the Northeast and across the country as a whole, 1988. So I know a lot of people have been concerned about how warm things are getting climatologically across the globe, but locally it has certainly been cold. And certainly something I think a lot of us maybe didn't expect until we saw that happening here at the end of the month of December. Now, looking ahead, we start to take a look at our teleconnections, and there's quite a bit of disagreement. Now, the Arctic Oscillation shows that we're going to be neutral to positive, meaning we don't have any major shots of cold coming to North America from the other side of the globe at this point. Doesn't mean it won't get cold. It just doesn't mean we don't have anything massive set to set in. If you look at the EPO, it is positive, meaning high pressure takes over across the eastern U.S. and lower pressure and colder air just off the West Coast. You will see it goes back to negative next week, and the GFS keeps it negative or near neutral to negative into February and even early March. What this means is that we are probably not done with winter and winter storms if this is correct. Now, this is the GFS. Here is the European, and you can see it does not agree with the GFS. In fact, it goes towards positive or neutral through February. So we've got a massive disagreement from about the 10th of February on, which is going to lead to some wailing and gnashing of teeth if you're a long range forecaster like I am. If you look at the NAO, the North Atlantic Oscillation, when this is positive, storms are going to zip on through. We're not going to have a big storm coming up the East Coast. If it gets negative, though, we do have that potential for things to get blocked before they leave the East Coast. And you can see here, there's some chance, but it is not a great chance for that blocking to take over. If you look at the GFS, again, it doesn't look like a really good setup for a blockbuster East Coast storm, but there are some possibilities here towards the end of the month of February and maybe the beginning of December. So we like to look at the upper level pattern, and we can see the ridging taking over. That's some warmer, brighter colors. Trough off the West Coast, meaning very wet in the Pac Northwest and Northern Cal, cold across Eastern Canada. But you can see that cold retreats. The cold in the West starts to make its way across the country and then begins to split off. And when we see this trough split here, we definitely are going to have to keep an eye on storms that start to track farther to the south again, right around Valentine's Day and into President's Day. When we see this kind of contrast, we've got to be worried about some severe weather down south and heavier winter weather across the central into the northeastern part of the country. Never a guarantee, but that's what we're going to be watching here in a couple of weeks. Here's the temperature anomalies, very mild here across much of the country, except for New England, where we've got this new wave of cold coming down here over the weekend. We do have a wave of cold as well coming into the northwest from Western Canada, and it looks really mean and nasty, but it doesn't make any progress farther to the south really through the first week of February. It's cold, but it doesn't make its push to the south like what we saw last month. So we have a classic tug of war here between mild weather in the southeast and colder weather in the northwest. And the Euro says we are going to get some cold coming down again, but it's really not going to make it all the way into the southeast. It's going to try, but it is going to struggle to come on down. If you look at precipitation, you can see the southeast is warm and mild here with not a whole lot of rain, unfortunately. Our wet weather is going to be focused on California, especially northern Cal and the Intermountain West and around the Great Lakes. Now, beyond that, we do see things getting wetter here on our battleground. So we could be in for more winter storms north of this area here around the Ohio River and on north after the 11th or so. And the west looks like it's going to turn dry again, which is not good news for the southwest, especially California. Now, that's just the next couple of weeks. Looking at snow totals, again, nothing to talk about down south. Really not a lot to talk about in the Tennessee or Ohio valleys either, but you do see things starting to look maybe a little bit more promising here for the second to third week of February, depending on where things are going to track. And that could be a better shot for us to see some snow around New York City and into New England as well. Now, the longer range forecast, this is where things are going to get a little bit more interesting. You can see here that high pressure aloft does build back in, but a big trough swings through the western part of the country. And then that's going to eventually move to the east. So the European says we are not done with winter. Heading into March, we still could be fair game for significant winter weather, mainly in the west and in the northern part of the country. This kind of a setup also spells potentially some significant severe weather down south, from Texas into the southeast and maybe the Tennessee and Ohio valleys as well. But again, this is quite a bit of a different look than what we just had here in the last couple of weeks when the big trough was down in here and the ridge was back up into here. You can see Alaska's getting colder. It's warming up to the west of Alaska and definitely warming up on the East Coast. And this could set up a pretty good battleground at the end of February into March up the eastern seaboard. Here's a look at the Europeans' long range temperature forecast. A lot of back and forth, but it is turning colder in the Northeast again at the end of the month of February and into the beginning of March. So, what this is telling me is that we're not going to see widespread cold in February like we did in January. However, it means we are going to go back into a colder period later in February into early March with respect to average. And that back and forth could certainly set us up for more significant winter weather. Now, down south, I think we're pretty much done with snow in Louisiana and those areas. That was a kind of a once in a generation storm. But we are certainly going to have to keep an eye on where the storm track's going to be. You can see it is looking like it could get a little bit more active across the Ohio and Tennessee valleys here heading into the beginning of the month of March. And maybe quite active here in the eastern part of the country heading into the middle of the month of March, right around March Madness. So very interesting stuff here. And I didn't just take you through 20 minutes of garbage. I wanted to show you that we just can't make a very highly confident forecast. But I will say this, I do believe that in the South, we're pretty much finished with any widespread winter. It may get cold again, but I don't think we're going to see a major winter storm. In the Northeast, the Ohio Valley, and in the Great Lakes, winter is going strong. We're going to see a bit of a break, but it is coming back. And that will be some good news for you snow lovers who maybe on spring break want to take a trip to a ski area in the Northeast. So that's all I have for you all today. I know it's been busy, maybe not in the weather department, but been busy for me. And I know it's been busy for you all. But despite all the busyness, I like to take a step back and just be thankful for what I have. And I hope that you're thankful for what you have as well. I am a Christian, and I think a lot of what I do is driven by the fact that I appreciate what's been done for me. And that is the Lord sending his son, Jesus, to die on the cross. You may not believe that, but that's what I personally believe. And that's what drives me to do what I do here on YouTube and in my life and with my family and people that I take care of in my life. But I do want to share a quick passage. Paul tells the church of Philippi in Philippians 2, 9, 10, and 11 that wherefore God also hath highly exalted him and given him a name which is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow of things in heaven and things in earth and things under the earth, and that every tongue should confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, and to the glory of God the Father. And that is the good news I wanted to share with everybody today, that God is good, that he deserves all the honor, all the credit, and all the glory for every creeping thing that creepeth here on earth. And as always, I want to just continue to encourage those of you who come here. I appreciate y'all's time. And if you want to come back and see more, I urge you to subscribe and follow along on Facebook here and YouTube. I will catch up with you all here later this week. Hope everybody has a blessed evening. See you soon.